Vicki Saunders is a transformative entrepreneur, global changemaker, and visionary leader who has dedicated her life to reimagining economic and social systems. With a remarkable track record of founding 5 businesses across Europe, Silicon Valley, and Canada, Vicki has emerged as a pioneering force in challenging traditional approaches to entrepreneurship and economic development. As the founder of Coralus, she has created a groundbreaking model of radical generosity that has disrupted conventional funding mechanisms. Her organisation has circulated over $14 million to 150 ventures led by women and non-binary entrepreneurs globally, with an extraordinary 95% loan repayment rate. This achievement is not just a financial success, but a profound statement about alternative economic possibilities. Recognised with numerous prestigious awards, including the UBS Global Visionary in 2020 and the YWCA Women of Distinction Award, Vicki has been celebrated for her innovative approach to social entrepreneurship. Her work goes far beyond traditional business models, focusing on solving critical global challenges and creating economic systems that prioritise collective well-being over individual extraction. A serial entrepreneur with a global perspective, Vicki has consistently challenged the status quo. From her early experiences on a farm near Ottawa in Canada, where she learned the value of experimentation and problem solving, to her current work supporting ventures addressing the UN Sustainable Development Goals, she lives an unwavering commitment to systems change. Vicki, welcome to Chasing Financial Equality.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
Can you tell us what it was like growing up on a farm and whether you think that you learned things that other kids didn't as a result?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things where, the older you get, the more you kind of pull the thread through of like, what are the roots that you've got that really help you to become who you are these days? And yes, growing up in the family that I did, on the land that I did, I think has had really profound impact on my vision of what's possible. So my parents, we were living in the city until I was 9, and then they moved to the country and bought this plot of land with like nothing on it except 40 acres of a forest, and then started to dream in sidebar businesses. They both had full-time jobs. And it started with pick your own strawberries. And so we had 32 acres of pick your own strawberries, and the kids were the labor. And then all of our friends were the labor. And it was like a lot of work figuring out how to do things. And we were all learning as we went. And it evolved over time into multiple different businesses. It's now SaundersFarm.com. It wins all these awards and it's also like literally impossible to explain. If you think of a farm, it's not really like a farm. It's kind of like Coralus. When you talk about what this economic and social model is, it's hard to explain. You have to experience it. So I am like literally living in the roots of like that. When you design things holistically and they're more than one thing, and this world wants us to like reduce everything down into a single one-liner that we can, like I don't live in that world. My family doesn't live in that world. I wasn't trained for that world. But one of the things there's many different things I learned, but a lot about like resilience, dreaming, and no failure. So we would sit at the dinner table and like dream up ideas for like, what might people come out here for? And then we'd go and build it or create it and then see if people came. And if it didn't work, we'd try something else. And it was like this constant iteration. And we didn't put a ton of money into anything because we didn't have a lot of money. So it was all like sweat equity to try something out. And then the whole community was involved. And so when you don't have a lot of resources, you get like really creative. And one of the most amazing things I learned from my mom, like my dad was a big vision guy, and my mom was like community roots, making things happen, the queen of to-do lists. And so she would say, oh, we need a porch and we need a new barn over there. We need all these things. And she would invite out all of their friends from the city for like a fun come to the farm day. They were like work parties for people to bring their families, which was amazing. And people loved it because they got to experience collectively doing something. And so I learned at a very early age, like, what are people's gifts? Create conditions and situations for them to contribute their gifts so they feel interconnected and have meaning. And that's not like bugging someone to like contribute to your vision. It's everyone's vision. And so now at the, 50 years later from when the farm started, many, many, like hundreds, if not thousands of people from that Ottawa area feel like they were part of building this business. And
It's
we're
really
now a
interesting.
third generation, like it's of the community. It's not
The
owned by a family.
the weekend farm work parties speak very dearly to me. My family had a farm, a small farm, growing up, and my uncle used to send out this sort of circular question of, hey, what have you got planned on the weekend? Maybe we should all head up to the farm, and we'd all get up to the farm, and we'd find a particularly large tree had fallen over and needed cutting up.
Yeah, I love that. What are you doing after school today?
Yeah. Do you want to just nip by the farm? That's not on my way, but okay. Can you think of any key memories from your life as a kid that might have pushed you towards caring about problems that are bigger than yourself?
Yeah, well, I had a pretty big, I had like a kind of heavy feeling as a little kid thinking I'm here to do something like really important, but I don't know what it is. And so I was always sitting with the adults at the table, listening to all the things they were talking about. And I'd be like, wow, none of these people are doing things that feel like I would be free and like feels like my work. So I was just always super curious looking for like, what is that thing? And it never really occurred to me as I was being trained essentially in this way of being at the farm. Like no one talked about it as entrepreneurship. Like my parents modeled creating the kind of world and the kind of business you'd like to exist that didn't exist anywhere else. So I was brought up in that. Dream it, try it, see who comes. Does it feel right? Whereas, like a lot of people I know were like, what's out there? Let me fit into what's out there. And I was very much like, there's something in me that wants to be born and I don't know what it is. Keep trying things and looking for it. So it was very much that curiosity, try it, strike it off the list if it's not the thing, and keep going. Keep moving was a very big part of the training that I got. And then my dad is like literally the worst person in the world at giving instructions on anything. It's just like all in his head. And he's like, what are you doing there? And you're like, he'd be like, go out and weed go to field 1 and start at the top. And we'd be like, what's the top and where's field 1? But you couldn't ask him because you would get screamed at if you were like, what are you, an idiot? He, of course, completely denies that he was like this now. And so we'd have to like all collectively sense into like, okay, where do you think the top is? What do you think? And so everyone was sharing whatever information we had to try and figure things out. There was just so much uncertainty and lack of clarity, and you had to kind of sense into things. So I feel like I am very good at like noticing all of the things that are out there to try and find my way without maps in uncertain times. Yeah.
It sounds to me very much like the overarching themes and learnings as a child are ones of solving problems. Everything's a problem to be solved. How do we get there?
Yeah, or sensing into what wants to be birthed, like a little bit different. Because I don't necessarily think of like I have a very strong fix it energy, which is not helpful in the world anymore because there's nothing to fix. We have to we have to drop all of our conditioning of the way things are supposed to be to dream into how we'd like to live. And so I think that is really an essence piece for me. They were not following any kind of roadmap of how to do something. They were building a business that fit them perfectly with their gifts, with the resources and the people they had around them, with ease and with like, very little actual capital, like money as capital, but they had lots of social capital. And so that's kind of how I feel about what we're doing with Coralus. It's like we're in a world where everything has been like massively monetized and we think we can't do anything unless we have money. And I've literally been trained in very much the opposite. Like money is like the last thing you need. You need like some vision, some like really good enrolling skills, build relationships with people such that they would like to be part of your orbit. And then everybody's contributing to each other's things. Like it's it's not the transaction way, it's the relationship way.
Can you tell me about your life in the lead up to starting Coralus, and also talk me through how it came to be as an organization?
Yeah, long one. So thought I was going to be an academic. That was on my list, one of the things. And then I'm like, nope, doesn't feel like I'm going to be the most free there. Tried that out. But I went to, in between master's and PhD, I went to Europe just to do what you do, put on a backpack and see what else you can explore and what else you can find out there. And when I was there, the wall fell down. The Berlin Wall. For those who are too young to know what that is, go Google it. And it was amazing because I was like, oh my God, this is future. Like a whole, country slash, part of the world is being freed, liberated. What might happen there? That might be amazing. And so I got on a train and went over and was in crowds of like hundreds of thousands of people dreaming about what they were going to do now that they were free. And to me, yeah,
That's goosebumps.
it was for me to full body, like blow my mind. 2 weeks of like every single conversation. Now that I'm free, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm free too. Right? Like I'm free is what hit me there. What am I going to do?
Wow, it's complete opposite to maybe how some people felt last week.
Yeah. Well, and again, this is the work of our times to free ourselves, right? And to like, look, if you just keep everybody has a PhD in what's not working, everybody, right? And we don't want to put any energy there. We want to look towards like, what do we want to create? And this whole system and structure that we're in is dismantling itself by the day. There's nothing for us to pull down or to tear down. what we have to do is think about, how do we want to be together as people in the world? How do we want to connect with each other? What kind of relationships do we want to be in? And what kind of world do we want to create? We can do anything. We've forgotten that, though, because we have a narrative coming at us every single day of victim, you have no power, we're in charge. And so that's not true. It's just because we've been very well isolated from each other in this crazy narrative that makes us feel like we can't do anything. But when you get in community together, you start to see what's possible. Yeah. So anyway, I did Prague. That was crazy. Started a number of businesses over there. That's where I really realized I was going to be an entrepreneur. And I got all my friends to start businesses. And then one day someone asked me, why are you doing all of this here instead of in your own country? And it really, it's just been the organizing principle of the rest of my life, which is, how do you create the conditions for people to free themselves so that they go and do what they know they're here for? That dream that's inside of us that we keep really small, because if we say it, people are going to judge us, or who am I to do these things? And how do you create those conditions where people are like, you're amazing, Kane. What do you want to do? Oh yeah. How can I help? We don't kind of live in that stew at the moment. We're in a place where people are very skilled and gifted at shutting down dreams.
Yes.
And so I kept learning over and over that, in many ways, I'm a protector of dreams. I'm a dreamer, and I want to protect people with dreams, because that's what creates the stunning world that we know is possible. So I had lots of different experiments trying to find ways to create those conditions. So I did the first sort of incubators and accelerators in Canada, took that public. And then I saw lots of young ones feeling like the problems of the world are so big. Why is my little bit going to matter? So created this really interesting visualization engine in a company called Zazen Go, which is awareness to action, to see what happens when I do my little thing with my 10 friends, and then with my community, and then with my city, and then with my country. Whoa, we just created massive change. So to understand the aggregation of network-based action. And so played with that for a while. And I've always been sort of in that behavior changey mindset shift, what's possible, get your dreams out there. And always done this in the container of business and innovation.
Mhm.
That's the thing I really like having a for-profit company that you're the 100% owner of is amazing, right? You are in charge of, you can put your money wherever you want. You can hire whoever you want. You can work whatever hours you want. You're in charge. But I feel like we're in this time where there's a lot of narrative around business. Business is here to exploit and take advantage of people, maximize profit, and a greed machine. But that's not true for the vast majority of how business is done at all, right? So it's really very different. So I've just been following the breadcrumbs around bringing my dreams out and trying to figure out how to create the conditions for others to live their dreams. Because if we all start to live our dreams, we're going to have this incredible world.
Can you walk me through a specific example of how Coralus operates?
So it started in 2015 in Canada. It was called SheEO. And we've changed our name since to Coralus. So Coralus is a new way of moving capital to those who have ideas to create a better world, with a business model attached to it. And so it's 0% interest loans, so non-extractive capital. We take no equity in anything. We are aggregating together capital, loaning it out at 0% interest over a 5-year period, and then people apply for that capital, get the capital, and pay it back over 5 years. And then it just keeps circling forward in the community. And so it started with $1,100 contribution. People make a gift of $1,100 a year into a pool of capital. And then we aggregate it all together, and then folks apply. And so we started with 500 people in Canada, 500 women contributed $100,000 pool of capital. 250 young entrepreneurs applied, and they answered 10 questions. Super simple
Wow.
application form, no jargon, no attachments, no pitch decks, none of that. Just tell us from your heart why this idea that you have is meant to be in the world, why now is the right time, and how this community can help you with that. And so we selected 5 ventures. They each got some money as part of that. They divided up the money themselves. We turned it over to them to do the due diligence and figure out how much money each of them would get based on the impact that they could have. And then where everything turns on is, so they've got some financial capital, but then they get those 500 people on their team. What do you need? Introductions, connections, a hug. You had a tough day. like all the different things that are required. And money is like important, obviously, to get your ideas going. But what's way more important is that the network connections and the expertise surrounded you and the support for when the going gets really tough. And so we started that in Canada, and then we rapidly added a country each year. We went from Canada to the US to New Zealand to Australia to the UK recently. And then COVID, everything kind of slowed down during that time. I mean, our programming speeded up, but we didn't expand to any more countries. And now we've just put all the money into one pot. We're now up to 19 million. We're circulating in 190 ventures. And you can apply from anywhere in the world, and you can become a member of this community from anywhere in the world. And it's really shifted over time from we're here to help those who have dreams that are going to benefit all of us to we're here to actually help everyone in this community build like a new model. And so transform our way. We're not trying to win in the existing system. We're trying to transform the system into a better system that works for everybody.
I like that. One of my favorite quotes is by Buckminster Fuller, who was a big fan of building a new system or a new model to make the old one obsolete. I really like that approach.
Yeah, that's the only way. It took a while for people to catch up, though, because, I have this line in my book, Everything's Broken. What a great time to be alive. And people would be like, what's broken? What do you mean? Because, 10 years ago, people weren't seeing the system.
No.
It's really only been in the last few years that, every day you're seeing the corruption, like the curtains are being pulled back, and we can see now this system works perfectly, just not for humans.
On that, you've described our current moment in time as a 400-year turning point in economic thinking. You've also spoken about Adam Smith and how his economic assumptions no longer serve us. Can you speak more about this moment in time?
Yeah, it turns out that if you are a historian or like a student of history, there are all kinds of trends that we're rolling through, just patterns and patterns. And so we're at the end of a 400-year cycle of a certain belief and philosophy about the world. And we're valuing things that are like not really serving us anymore. And we're at a fork in the road where we have to like come up with what are we going to value next? And because what we've done now is we've valued money over everything else, the individual over the collective, to the point that it's just like decimating. Nature is decimating everything, and humans, like the mental health crisis, the poly crisis of climate, of inequality, everything is upon us, and it is a direct result of our value system. It's just crazy how much we've monetized everything. That's all that anyone thinks matters is money, money, money. And so we have to step back and realize we're in this like finite biosphere, that we're living well beyond our means, and it's done. So we have to like recreate it, reimagine what could this look like?
There are a lot of people working in systems change, and we often find ourselves speaking with wonderful people working toward positive social impact that we tend to feel might hit a dead end because they often overlook or don't fully comprehend the powerful role that the world's finance industry plays in maintaining the status quo. I want to read you two quotes before I ask your view on this. First, a quote to outline the problem. It's from a 1995 speech by Urvashi Vaid, who was a well-known civil rights activist. She said, "The problem is not that the progressive politics of the 60s failed, but that they succeeded too much culturally. What I think the movements of the 60s failed to do was tackle the structural inequalities in American society, inequalities that arise from a morally bankrupt and absolutely out of control economic system. Today, we are witness to the social problems, the wars, the violence, the poverty, and the fear caused by the failures of social justice movements to construct a more socially responsible capitalism." And the second quote is by Ernst Sahan, who was the former chief executive of the World Fair Trade Organization. And he said on this very show, actually, that whenever you ask a question about society, about human rights, about our climate, you end up in the finance industry. Everything is in service of finance. It's the single biggest force, and nothing else we do to fix the world matters unless we fix the finance industry. How do you feel about these two statements?
Well, yuck to the second. I get it, but I get that everyone just goes to focus on the money. But I actually think it's the values underlying things. I do agree with Urvashi on we have an economic system that's completely out of control and doesn't serve humans. It serves 5 humans. Those dudes are doing great. But poverty is good business. Terrible statement, but that's E.F. Schumacher and Satish Kumar, who is the principal at E.F. Schumacher College. It's completely crazy that we have this economic model that it's hard to get underneath because everything's so interconnected, and it's hard to see what's really going on with it, except for now where we can actually literally see we're in this place that has emerged in the last few years where all the toll roads. Like if you're in business, I'll give an example here. If you're in business, it costs 40 cents on the dollar in your company to go get new customers because the toll roads are owned by Amazon, Google, Facebook, etc. So they own the pipes to access people. They let you see a smidgen of what you actually could from your audience. And by controlling all of that, like there, if you don't own the relationship to your customers and you have to do it in the system, you literally have to raise a ton of money in order to lose money for decades to hopefully, quote unquote, win the market like Amazon did, right? Like that model is like so incredibly broken. So I live in Canada where 99% of our economy is small and medium sized business. I mean, what's going to happen to our economy? Like it just feels like everything's kind of crashing as we start to see the end days of this late stage capitalism is incredibly painful. And so I get that people always go to finance and everything goes to scale, but I think we're stuck in a bit of a narrative of thinking that big is the only way to change anything. Like I'm going to have to take the system that we're in, and before we move to the new one, we have to see how it's going to be big enough to replace this. But that's not how change happens. Things start to fall apart. You take a step, another step reveals a whole other possibility. And we're not very gifted yet at understanding distributed networks and exponential growth at a distributed network scale. So we keep dissing anything small, thinking it won't ever get us there, but that's not true. It's like the small stuff rooted in community, rooted in sustainable models that's localized, all connected together with the interstitium, which I can come back to later, creates a whole other way of being in the world. But we just think everything is hierarchical, enormous.
If we boil that down to lay terms and bring it back to maybe your farm experience, is that essentially working on projects in a small community that then finds a larger community through that first community? It sort of spreads through that mechanism?
Yeah, I think it's like identifying the conditions locally that allow something to sustain itself and not necessarily to grow, but like maybe replicating these models for different conditions in different places. But getting to the Dunbar number of 150, understanding that like anything over a certain number, you can't be in relationship anymore. And the farther and farther you extract out from that, the harder it is to see the connections between things, and things aren't transparent anymore. And that's where lots of corruption and other problems start to come in. And as soon as I am disconnected from you, Kane, I don't care about you as much. If I can't stay in relationship with you, I can't pay attention to where resources are going and how they're monitoring. I mean, I think I come back to there are various economic models that we've had prior to this one. This isn't the only way to organize a society, but we're stuck because we don't look back at history to recognize that there are lots of other ways of doing this. And we have to look to Indigenous communities in particular who really understand how to work in collaboration in reciprocity with nature.
You've previously warned about the potential of collapse of our society due to inequality. Do you think that is a real possibility?
I think we're kind of in it right now. Yeah, it's happening. And when we say collapse, I mean, we are in collapse. Let's look at the fires. Let's look at the genocide. Let's look at like the lack of political will to care for humans, to care for animals, to understand that we are part of nature. Like we just have a mindset that is so far removed from the actual reality of how things work. We're telling ourselves a story that isn't true. There is no such thing as there is no scarcity. It's the way that we're organized around these things. There's an abundance of all kinds of resources when you're, living in harmony with nature, but we're just organized incredibly poorly and I mean, the collapse stories are written all over the place. That we're like a classic case of like civilization collapse. If you go back to all the different books that are out there. So we're in it. But I also feel like I truly believe there's a consciousness raising going on right now that we can shift this. The earth will be fine whether or not humans are on it. We have some work to do right at this moment. I think the only thing that we really, really need to be focused on is how do we want to live together? How do we want to be together? To me, that's the X Prize we should have, not finding the single solution to pop us all to Mars. Like we have to figure out how we're all going to live together and what matters to us about caring for one another.
Serendipitously, my next question was around a scarcity versus abundance mindset.
Yeah.
We live in a time of fear, and that fear drives isolation. It drives the adoption of this scarcity mindset, which is so toxic to wanting to connect with people, wanting to support people and understand and listen to their stories in life. Can you think of any practical steps that people who might be feeling that can take to head towards adopting an abundance mindset and being open to growth and connecting and community?
Yeah, I think every single person has something in abundance in their life. Everybody does. Just think about what that is and, do a bit of a deep dive. So for me, I have an abundance of connections. I have 30,000 something plus folks that I'm connected to on LinkedIn, all of whom I know, most of whom owe me a favor, and I can never use all those favors. And I often say to people, if you see someone in my community who would be useful to you, please let me know and I'll make an introduction and keep that reciprocity going, because that's really important. So everyone has some kind of abundance of something. And what generally happens here is we always go to the thing that we don't have an abundance of, and then we try and design from there. But if we design from our abundance, life gets a lot easier. If you know, the thing that you have in abundance is your gift. And that gift is meant to be shared. It's actually a responsibility to share it if you look at Indigenous worldview. And so I think from that perspective, I'm always looking for what am I grateful for and what do I have an abundance of? Start sharing that and then notice from other people what they have an abundance of. If we started organizing around our gifts, you would see a very, very different possibilities emerging. And that's what we do in our Coralus community. People contribute, we call it radical generosity. You're contributing what you have in abundance to one another. So some people are like, I love spreadsheets. I could be in them all day long. I love financial modeling. And I'm like, you do what? What is that actually a thing? I hate that stuff. But they love it and they would love to contribute that to me. And I'm like, hey, I'll make connections to you so you can get customers. I'm really good at storytelling. I'll help you with the storytelling part. And when we each start to do that, we create these very different conditions for each of us to thrive. And I think the other piece I want to just share is, you said we live in a time of fear. And I think that's a modality, but also a time of love, right? And so we're in this, we have to get ourselves a little bit out of the duality. Is it scarcity or abundance? Is it fear or is it love? Is it good or is it bad? Yes is the answer. It's all those things. And where do you want to orient yourself towards? So I could wake up every day and go scroll the news and get into a fear scrolling, doom scrolling. Or I can start my day with all of life flows to me with ease and joy, right? I come from a completely different place and I'm going to look today for what brings me joy and what brings me love. And when I start to look, I create more of that.
I like to escape the binary mindset by talking about our time as one of opportunity. We have the biggest opportunity now to make change. And I just also want to evidence for our listeners how your approach to networking actually works in practice. The reason we're talking today is because a member of the Coralus network, Karen Monahan, introduced us. And you responded to that straight away. And I was like, yep, absolutely, I'd love to chat. And I think if all introductions that come out of the network are being responded to in the same vein, I think that's an incredibly powerful force that evidences many of the things you talk about in terms of multiplying that community. Coralus specifically funds ventures led by women and non-binary individuals. Coralus funds ventures led by women, non-binary individuals, and marginalised communities. Why?
Because we're living in a world where 98% of the capital goes to, because we're living in a world where 2% of capital goes to 50% of the population. So we're living in a world essentially with only the ideas of half the population. We're missing this incredibly different perspective. And, societies that are on the brink of collapse often have as a core sort of underlying issue, imbalance and a lack of diversity. Really healthy ecosystems have exceptional diversity. And when you get too out of balance, you start to see things fall apart. And so we wanted to go, I wonder what a world would look like if everybody's ideas were supported and celebrated. Maybe it would be a little different. Maybe it would be healthier. Let's have an experiment and try that out. So that was the big focus for us, because we started to see this where capital was going. So where nutrients go, things thrive. And where they don't thrive. Very simple. It's the law of nature. And so if you start to look at that, you just kind of pay attention to where resources are going. And if it's not yielding you a healthier, society, it's a big problem. And so our monoculture, our driving of monoculture, 60% of agriculture being soybeans in the US and corn, and what that starts to do to the land and the soil. 97% of soil has been eroded in the world because of our monoculture approach, as opposed to having a blended diversity of opportunity. And so you can see that literally in every single sector, in every different thing that we're going at. The more we get to a mono narrative, monoculture, the more trouble we're in.
All of the All of the evidence we have points to the fact that people who live in more equal societies are happier. So I think it flows that people who live in more diverse societies should be too. Can you share a success story from Coralus that highlights the impact of backing these kinds of approaches?
Sure. And, success, we have a very broad definition of success. Success isn't just like some hockey stick, massive unicorny thing, which don't exist, by the way. So an example would be in your region. In New Zealand, we have funded an entrepreneur collective called Better Packaging. And this is Kate Bazar and Rebecca Perkowski invented the world's first home compostable courier packaging. So all of our courier packaging just goes into the landfill, and it's getting worse and worse as everyone just keeps buying from Amazon and, getting all these packages at home. And so they designed this new material essentially that allows for like compostability. But then they started to see like the plastics lining up in the ocean were just so massive. And a lot of the plastic pollution accumulates in rivers and waterways in impoverished communities. So they created a business model. They went back to the drawing board after they created this first cool product and said, what if we could actually stop the plastic from going in the ocean in the first place? And so they've hired folks in these impoverished communities to take the pollution out of the rivers and waterways and use that as the raw material for the packaging. So they're making packaging out of pollution that is home compostable. And they're on the verge of that being cheaper than native plastic, than virgin plastic. So this is an incredible story of a company that is scaling and growing. The more that it grows, the more it heals, as opposed to what our model really is in the world right now, where the more things scale, the more they extract. So this idea of like, how can you design things that as they get bigger, they're healing even more? That's the kind of, the sort of circular approach that we're looking for, the cleaning up of existing resources and repurposing. So that's one example that we're very excited about.
It also points very well to how funding diverse people leads to better outcomes for everyone as well. And I think that's really important to highlight.
Yeah. And I mean, and that one in particular, a very good example of this is as they were thriving and growing their business and getting more revenue, they saw the problem that they were tackling as growing bigger. So they needed a new approach to it. Most of their investors and the financial narrative would be like, you don't need to go build something else. Like just keep doing what you're doing and scale that up. But they want to solve the problem. They're not just here to maximize their income and their revenues and the return. And then when they came up with this new model, which we were extremely excited about it, a lot of investors are like, oh, I hate that part where you go in and you have people in the communities take that pollution out of the rivers and waterways. That's too complicated. Just use raw materials. Like that's what finance thinks, right? Too much friction.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
we're looking for is wait, no, like literally beautiful cradle to cradle design that heals. And, we're impact first always. And then, obviously you want to have something sustainable, but just going money first and then we'll figure out the other stuff later is not working for us.
Your work spans multiple countries. What are the common barriers that you've observed that prevent economic inclusion?
Well, our economic system. I mean, I think we're stuck with a system and a structure that has a lot of biases and a playbook of what is success and how to grow. And the system is everywhere, like it's ubiquitous. So the biggest challenge is our mindset that this is the only way to do things. So if you can find people, which we are a community full of folks who are committed to doing things differently and figuring out how to unlearn the conditioning we've had so that we can actually dream up the systems and structures that work better for all of us and create the kind of world that we all want to live in, where we can all thrive, not, until everyone thrives, like no one, we're not going to get to the kind of world that we need. And so that's a whole shift. It's like, well, we're, living in a super fragile place where we think if I just accumulated enough, I'll be safe. Let's look at Pacific Palisades. Like, nope. That was just like such a classic example of how there is no security when we're living outside of our means. There's none. And, you can go put yourself on an island, but still, if there's a hurricane coming, you're not going to be able to survive that. And who wants to be the last 3 people left anyway? Oh, great. You built your big spot that you think is, but you're behind big, huge gates, stuck in this isolation. And so the system and the mindset that we have of how to do things and our like lack of imagination these days of how to redesign things and how to shift the way that we're living is, I think, the biggest crisis.
Talk a lot about how if we keep going on the path we're going on, we'll end up some of us will all end up living behind walls, and it doesn't matter what side of that wall you live on, you will still be behind it. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, that the walls don't really matter how you experience them. We shouldn't be building them. We should be looking about how we grow community, not put barriers between the startup industry and the VC industry perpetuates a narrative about founders taking huge risks and doing what they do because of the chance of finding incredible success on the other side. And I very strongly disagree with that. I don't think that's why most founders do what they do. What role do you think individual incentive plays in building solutions for collective benefit?
I think incentive matters, but I also have a very big, there's a big gap between intrinsic and extrinsic incentives. And so I personally, my incentives, I go to bed every night thinking, was I useful today? And did I feel like I got feedback from someone, like what I gave was useful to them and it felt meaningful to me to be contributing to what they're doing? That for me is like my motivation. Some people it's, the bank balance. But for most people, all the studies have been done that more money doesn't make you happier. So I think there's this deep dive into who are you, what moves you, what motivates you, what brings you joy, and what brings you meaning. And without doing that work, I think everything is just kind of messy for people, right? But as soon as you understand those things, you'll be driving there. But most of the dreamers I know are just they are born dreamers. They just keep chasing the dream, no matter what, whether or not they're having huge financial success. It's part of the DNA to get that dream out of the body and instantiate it into the world.
In the world of dreamers that you operate in, have you seen any difference in how younger generations approach economic change?
Not really, which would sound like a depressing answer. But I have seen, I'm old enough now that I've seen over generations, oh, the young ones now get it. Millennials are going to change how work is happening, and that was a thing for a while. But the system is a Swiss clock. It is operating in a certain way and it is achieving over until the system shifts. We all get sort of stuck on the hamster wheel of this is the way things operate, and the incentives drive towards a certain set of behaviors. And so I think obviously there's just deep discontent with existing systems right now. And it does feel like this generation coming along deeply desires different systems in place. But it's not just this generation, it's many of us. And we're now just seeing everything starting to fall. And so we're entering a time where we're going to see collapse across a lot of different sectors and systems that we have in place. And in that vacuum is where we can rebuild anew in a very exciting way. So if you look at the wildfires in California as an example, we know we had massive wildfires in Australia a couple of years ago. Insurance is not going to be a thing anymore. You're not going to be able to get insured. So what kind of innovation is going to come up in this collective way of doing insurance, or the collective way of securing ourselves? I think there's going to be a ton of innovation in that space. So I get really excited about a lot of these things, like the everything's broken, what a great time to be alive. I very much live in that because it's very easy to just fall down the rabbit hole and just feel like everything is over. I'm just going to isolate myself. Oh my God, it's a nightmare. Let me just try and get secure on my own. But the collapse of things allows for a moment to redesign the opportunity you mentioned. And if you do that in community, it can be really exciting. I think if you're only sitting by yourself, isolated from things, it feels just wildly overwhelming. And you just want to curl up in a ball. But when you're in a community, you can start to see how we each add to one another. We're just out of practice with it because we've been fed this thing about isolating yourself, separating yourself, put your own mask on. And so it's a real big challenge at that moment to break through that. But I think it's a practice that once we start working on it, which we're doing in our community, you start to see different possibilities emerge.
I usually end these interviews with the same question, and I'm actually going to deviate from that today to you. You are a hopeful person who looks forward. Looking forward, what specific initiatives at Coralus are you most excited about?
So it's a big one. We had a big reset last year and it's just starting to reveal itself to us, but we are going to start focusing on funding transformation only. And so if you have a model that is about building a new system, you're outside the system and you're figuring out how to build a new system, we're going to start funding that transformation. And we're moving from this 0% interest loans to using different forms of capital to support that transformation if you're doing it in a collective. And so we're going to start paying founders to take capital to do their work. So this is literally opposite land. In the world right now, we will write you a check, Kane, and say, okay, go and get me as big a return as possible. And you go do all this work and we'll take whatever we can to get off the top. We're going to pay you, Kane, because you are so effective at creating social impact in a cost-effective manner that we're going to pay you for that because the labor you're doing is on behalf of all of us and we should not be extracting from you at all. It's a literally opposite land view. I mean, if we keep trying to extract from where all of our money is going, there's literally going to be nothing left. So the big skill set of the day is who can create new business models that benefit all, that are helping us to heal the planet. And that's a skill set that, like, it's very easy to just go make a ton of money. Okay, whatever. But it's like much harder to think about, like, how do I transform these systems to work better for all? Redesigning the world is the work of the moment. Rethinking how we come together to work in each of these sectors. How do we deliver healthcare differently? How do we deliver education differently that benefits all, that isn't stuck in this box of doing a certain way? So funding, transformation, paying people to go and redesign the world is the big thing that I'm pumped about.
Vicki, I cannot think of a better way to end this interview. Thank you so much for your time today. I wish you all the luck with that mission. It's one that speaks very, very, very dearly to me and all of the people that are around us. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.